You're listening to Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong, all on Georgia Radio Network.
Welcome to episode 127 of the Let Me Tell You Why You're Wrong podcast. I'm Dave Roberts. With me, as always, is writer, journalist, TV personality, the beautiful and talented Jessica Szilagyi.
Hello, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you?
I'm fine. I didn't get called too many names this week.
No, or else I would have led with those.
I know. But instead, it was just the plain old Dave intro.
I mean, I go ahead and call you Miss Bossy Pants or whatever it is, or Miss. I think I'll go write a story.
How was your week?
So my week was great. I'm extraordinarily blessed to have such good folks that are my customers that write reviews and share me on their Nextdoor app and all that stuff. And like people, I get phone calls. Hey, a neighbor wrote something nice about you. I need you to come out and come take a look for me. So we're very, very lucky. How was your week?
It was nice. I went to see my mom in Atlanta. First time I've been up there actually since March. So as you can imagine, it looked different. It felt different. Yeah. And I didn't tell you.
I didn't even get a phone call. Yeah.
Well, no, I didn't go your direction, though. I went straight to Alpharetta and straight back to South Georgia.
Uh-huh. You'd come right into Dallas and leave without calling me.
I think that's happened.
I think probably.
I think Matt Newlow complained about me doing that. Or maybe I went to Douglasville. That's what it was.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
Well, I don't blame you for not calling Matt.
Yeah. Well.
So we want to mention our sponsor for the show. Big thanks to Big Daddy Unlimited. It's a discount club for Second Amendment and shooting enthusiasts. They offer huge discounts on firearms, optics, accessories, ammunition, flashlights, outdoor gear, knives, and all sorts of fun items. And they got brands like Advanced Armament, Abu Garcia, Aimpoint, Alpine Air Foods, Ammo Inc., Bear Archery, Bianchi, CMMG, Dan Wesson, Dean Air, Desert Eagle, Ed Brown, EOTech, Glock, H&K, Lapua, Magnum Research, Night Optics, PMC, Surefire, Uzi, Walther, Zeiss, and so many more. It's a buck to try them out for the first month. They're essentially a direct distributor, and they're using wholesale the volume of its members to get wholesale pricing and sell them direct to you. So at least check them out. Their link is on our Facebook page, and we'll attach a link to the show page as soon as we can. And at least give them a look. We really appreciate Big Daddy Unlimited being a part of the show.
Yes, it's exciting. And just so you know, I recently, and we'll talk about this more in upcoming shows, but I recently went through the whole process of getting a membership and buying a new gun all through them. And it's the first time I've ever bought a gun online and not in the store in person, like holding it and picking it out. But it was super easy, and I got exactly what I wanted, which was unavailable for like hundreds of miles in any direction. So, but we'll talk about that. Not next week, but the week after, probably.
Awesome.
Yes.
New gun is always exciting.
It is.
We need to recognize shortly after we recorded last week's show, we've got the news that John Lewis passed, and we certainly want to bring that up. He was a titan of the civil rights movement, and I think we could use a little more John Lewis from 1965 over what's happening right now.
I agree. He was the last one of the 6 with MLK to pass away. They've all passed now. And he was briefly my congressman when I lived in Atlanta before the redistricting and whatnot. But we kind of talked about it a little bit before the show. He got into, in the last decade especially, into a little cycle of, maybe more tantrum-oriented activism when he had such a track record of not doing that. So that was disappointing to see that evolve. But you can't discredit the impact he had. And he voted for civil liberties a lot more than Phil Gingrey and some of the other representatives I've had that are Republican. So,
yeah, and I think his entire party got tantrum oriented, and I think politics has become tantrum oriented, and it's disgusting to me that we can't discuss our viewpoints and disagree and vote the way we're going to vote in the House or in the Senate, and have a discussion rather than throw a tantrum. But you absolutely can't discount his role, and I mean, he gave his pound of flesh, literally being beaten and carrying the scars for the rest of his life, and that certainly can't be discounted. And all the rights that everyone enjoy now are tied back to what they did then, and getting rid of Jim Crow laws and making sure that we have equality for all people.
Absolutely. So it's interesting. We've talked on the show a lot about naming things after people, and how, I don't know, controversial it is no matter who it is, because somebody's always hated by somebody. I don't know a single building or monument or marker that has been endorsed by all people, but there's a school that's going to be changed to be named after John Lewis, and it's not even in Georgia.
Yeah, it is in Springfield, Virginia, Fairfax County, which is not too far from D.C., has voted to change the name of Robert E. Lee High School to name it after the late Congressman John Lewis. Where are you on this one?
I don't know. I mean, so I understand the Robert E. I get it. We're in that movement of anti-Confederate stuff. But Robert E. Lee was from Virginia. So I understand the concern, but there was is in Virginia. And John Lewis is from Alabama. And I don't know. I think it was like a timing thing. They wouldn't have named it after him otherwise. Very opportunistic.
Yeah, it was. It's one of those things where I don't care. I think it's probably a waste of that school district's money.
Oh, I totally agree with that.
I don't care. I mean, but you're right. Robert E. Lee was a Virginian. If we're just gonna pull Confederate names off of everything, I don't know. It doesn't bother me enough to go and pick it. I think it's disingenuous. I certainly think schools here should be named after him. A school in his hometown, Alabama, might be named after him. It would have been nice to give that honor before he passed.
You think so? I'm against naming things while people are alive. Only from my ego humility standpoint.
Yeah, but I don't think his passing was that big of a surprise.
In the interest of consistency, I've never supported the Nathan Deal judicial complex. I didn't support that.
You walk in there knowing you're going to get screwed.
Right. God, I'm not even going to touch that one because I can't say anything nice. So yeah, I'll let you have the final word there.
How many times do you think the lawyer is going to sit in that courthouse and go, okay, let's make a deal?
God.
Dave is an awful person. Cancel culture segment of the week. The Redskins are going to be renamed this year, but they're just going to be named the Washington Football Team.
It's so stupid. I'm sorry. It's the dumbest name ever.
They are so afraid of offending anyone that they're just going to call themselves a football team.
So what's their logo? The state outline?
Well, it's not even a state. The district?
Oh, that's true. I mean, well, you know what I mean? On the map, is it going to be the outline?
I assume it's going to be like the Giants. It'll just say Washington across the helmets. And, the Giants, the New York Football Giants. Further complicating this, there's a dude that bought, copyrighted, like something like 200 potential names for Washington. I mean, everything from like the Washington Swamp Monsters to everything you could think of, and he owns the rights to all those names. And he was anticipating being able to sell one of those names. So there's that. I thought the DC Crooks would be good. The chant could be look to the right, look to the left. Taxation is theft. In an epic response on the interwebs, on the Twitters, Zaxby's is proud to announce our new brand name is Chicken Restaurant.
Okay, so we talked about this before the show too. We were like, is this a real account? And I looked up their Twitter account, and they are one of the businesses that just makes their entire Twitter account, funny. Like, it's not offensive or anything like, I'm sure somebody's offended because God knows someone's offended about everything. But, they'll say like, respond to this tweet by typing your order with your eyes closed. And, they have a picture of a squirrel sitting on a fence and it says, oh, to be a squirrel eating a piece of toast on the fence. Like, it's not, how much can you really tweet about fast food? So they've definitely taken a unique perspective, but what a way to troll.
Yeah, what are they supposed to say? Chicken fingers, y'all.
Yeah. We're open again today.
And there's a huge movement towards that, the Instagram marketing stuff. And of course, I think Wendy's has got a parody account. We see a lot of that pop up on social media. But yeah, this is brilliant. It's great. And it'll get retweeted 1 million times. And that's all you have to do when you're a large brand like that, is just get in front of people. And hell, this is free. This is probably an intern that put this out, and it's free. And instead of buying a spot on TV, and with DVRs, no one watches commercials anyway, you get in front of 1 million shares that go to 10 million or 20 million possible views from people that is going to pop up in their feed because their friend shared it. It's brilliant. It's awesome. It's great. I love it.
Oh, it's fantastic. I support 10 out of 10. 5 stars. Would recommend.
5 stars would recommend.
Yes.
So, what do we have? Hashtag checkmate.
No, you forgot one.
Call. I forgot one. What did I forget?
Well, it's my fault because I started us out of order, but Kelly Loeffler announced that she was canceled.
Kelly Loeffler's been canceled for calling the BLM political organization a Marxist group.
But she tweeted, "I've been canceled." I don't even know what that means.
Not until November, possibly
right.
Possibly January.
Right. I wanted to say, yeah, only the voters can cancel you, Kel. But I've made it clear I'm really not a fan of her. But I just thought this was, in the era where people are just trying to, like the stuff with Wayfair and the Redskins, like where they're trying not to be canceled or to have the negative publicity around these types of things. Kelly Loeffler's like, yeah, I've been canceled. I'm a victim. Just drives me crazy.
I hate victim culture, period. I don't like it when the folks I like do it. I don't like it when folks I don't like do it. I don't like playing the victim. And I'm going to out-victim you. I've been canceled. Mm-hmm. A better thing is, apparently, I'm getting under the skin of Marxist group Black Lives Matter.
Because she's trying to.
Well, yeah, but that's a much better tweet to say is, obviously I'm getting under their skin, and then put forth, put forth the story of what they had to say about her, and then go with your platform. You get the attention and go with your platform. But look at me, I'm a victim. They're picking on a poor little farm girl from Georgia. Shut up. Look at me, I'm a victim. All I have are my billions of dollars to cry into. Lord have mercy. Now on to pound checkmate. Do what?
My bad.
GOP's Representative Louis Gohmert introduces a resolution to ban the Democratic Party. As it reads, that any political organization or party has ever held a public position that supported slavery or the Confederacy shall either change its name or be barred from participation in the House.
So, obviously, this isn't going to happen, or, I mean, he's doing it to make a point, but I think it's hilarious. And I'm not usually into the partisan games, but I mean, we've talked about cancel culture on here so much and how everything is offensive and how, we don't just allow people to have a difference of opinion. It has to be eradicated. And he's totally boxing them in because all the Twitter responses were, oh, well, the Republican Party and the Democratic Party flipped in the 1860s. And what about this? And what about this? And all these exceptions. That's not the point. The point is that right now they're called the Democratic Party, and the Democratic Party has ties to slavery, just like everything else. And so, that name should be banned too. Go find another name. And it's not going to happen, but I think it's hilarious. It made me laugh.
Even if it did, I understand. He's trolling.
Yes.
And he's playing to his base, and I don't know what his election looks like, or if he's even running for re-election in Texas. But it's funny. But what do you think? There's all the Democrats going to show up to the polls and go, whoa, I don't know who to vote for.
Right. Exactly. It's just he wants to take away everything in the any reference, like the Democratic conference rooms and references on plaques and paintings where history is chronicled and things like that. And I just think that's hilarious. Just a taste of their own medicine. And maybe that's a little bit hypocritical because I complain so much about them wasting time, but it really did make me laugh when I heard the audio.
The resolution is co-sponsored by Representatives Andy Biggs, Arizona, Jody Heiss, Georgia, Randy Weber, Texas, and Andy Harris.
Yeah.
More thought-provoking commentary from Jessica.
I mean, I shared a lot of thoughts on the actual topic. I'm sorry that I didn't have anything to add about the sponsors. If you can't say something nice, you're not supposed to say anything at all, and I can't say anything nice. So I just let out the first syllable.
So we've got some audio for you.
Whereas on June 18, 2020, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi ordered the removal from the Capitol portraits of 4 previous speakers of the House who served in the Confederacy, saying that these portraits, quote, set back our nation's work to confront and combat bigotry, unquote. The men depicted in the portraits were Democrat Robert M.T. Hunter, Democrat Howell Cobb, Democrat James L. Orr, and Democrat Charles F. Criss. Resolved that the Speaker of the House of Representatives shall remove any item that names, symbolizes, or mentions any political organization or party that has ever held a public position that supported slavery or the Confederacy from any area within the House wing of the Capitol or any House office building, and shall donate such item or symbol to the Library of Congress. And 2, that any political organization or party that has ever held a public position that supported slavery or the Confederacy shall either change its name or be barred from participation in the House of Representatives.
Just to remind everybody, these are our opinions and not necessarily those of All in Georgia, and certainly not those of any All in Georgia reporter not offering commentary on this show. So the main show segment this week, we're going to take a deep dive into the 1619 Project, a journalism hybrid effort turned grade school, public school curriculum since it's back in the forefront of national headlines thanks to a member of Congress.
So we were talking about the 1619 Project because you said that just last week you'd heard about it because it was being discussed on another podcast, right?
Right.
Is it a podcast? Right. I hadn't heard about this. It came out in an issue of the New York Times Magazine in 2019, and I don't read their magazine. I sometimes read their site, but I totally missed this, and I guess I missed all the headlines about it too. But my brother actually is the one that brought it to my attention because I have a 18 and 19-year-old niece and nephew, and their friends were talking about this. It's picking up steam among that age group, and a little bit younger, but they're in college, so they're beholden to liberal indoctrination right now. But I didn't heard about it, and my brother told me, what the premise was, and so I looked it up, and honestly, there's few things that actually offend me that you could learn, and this isn't offensive from the subject matter, but I think it's offensive that so late in the game of United States history, we want to change it so much. So do you want to talk about what the concept is, and then we can dive into who's behind it and everything?
The concept is that America was not founded in 1776 with the Declaration of Independence, that it was actually founded in 1619 with the arrival of the first African slaves onto the North American continent. That America is inherently racist because everything that this country is built on the back of slavery. That justice cannot be found in this country as it is, that it needs to be torn down and rebuilt from the ground up. Inherently, every person of color is a victim of the first arrival of the slaves in 1619. That none of the founding documents apply to them because they were not, their ancestors were not free men at the founding of this country. Several books have been written on it. Go ahead, Jessica.
No, I mean, there have been a lot of books and movements and articles written independently, and I think then those contributors kind of collaborated because the New York Times Magazine issue was, I think they had over 30 people that had either pieces and works of art and essays, historians, poets, playwrights, authors, and journalists, and then I think there was a professor in there as well. But the editor, Jake Silverstein, they've collaborated with the Pulitzer Center for Education to make this a curriculum in schools. Like they made it a formal thing with lesson plans and all of that. But the editor from the magazine actually says the goal of the 1619 Project is to reframe American history by considering what it would mean to regard 1619 as our nation's birth year. Doing so requires us to place the consequence of slavery and the contributions of Black Americans at the very center of the story we tell ourselves about who we are as a country. And then there's this woman named Nicole Hannah Jones, and she wrote one of the longer essays that is part of the curriculum. And her entire premise is that the colonists didn't want independence from Great Britain because of taxation or anything else, that's a myth. But the fact is that the primary reason they sought independence was to protect the institution of slavery.
Which we know is not true. We know from the writings of the Founding Fathers. We know from the Founding Fathers that were not deeply entrenched in slavery. We know that some were, and we know that Thomas Jefferson fathered children with Sally Hemings. We know that there were Founding Fathers that owned slaves, but the principle was not to protect slavery. The principle was that what we would consider now middle class and upper class were affected directly from the actions of the king. The best thing I heard was the Declaration of Independence, all men being created equal, was a check that was cached over the next 200 years. Those were our ideals. All men are created equal. Even in writing it, many of them were conflicted. Benjamin Franklin, towards the end of his life, started to lean abolitionist, especially after spending time in France, and his thoughts on the matter evolved over the course of his lifetime. But this revisionist part of history is dangerous.
It is, and I mean, what's from a libertarian perspective, which is kind of, I'm not sure if that's the right perspective to take or the quite right angle because of how this plays into public education and everything, but it's frustrating that we're going to pretend, I mean, if you're saying that, let me back up. There's two different components here. First, you're saying that it's a myth that we wanted independence because of taxation without representation. And then there's the second part of it, which is technically the first, because they're saying that America, or the concept of America, was started much earlier and the foundations were laid much earlier, so we need to move the birth date back. Well, I mean, so are you going to move the birth date back and then also take out the part of history about taxation without representation so that that's no longer taught, so that we no longer teach children in schools that, you know, this country stood up for personal responsibility and a representative form of government and getting what you pay for? I mean, that sounds like the basis here.
It absolutely, totally. All of a sudden, I'm an 18-year-old college freshman. Ignores the political implications of paying for the French and Indian War, the punitive taxes that were put on the colonists in order to pay for the war. Even going back to the lobbying of the king to give some representation to the colonies. In fact, the American Revolution could have been avoided completely with adding representatives to Parliament from the colonies. But that's neither here nor there. But there's a much more complicated history to the founding of this nation that is even much deeper than a bunch of rich white guys didn't want to pay their taxes and formed a rebellion. So,
and again, we're teaching that that's wrong. We're moving away from the things that make this. I mean, we've moved away from so much and our foundations and all of that, but the very idea of America, I have no issue with teaching slavery. That is a dark part of our history, and there are lots of different viewpoints of that time in history that should all be represented. Like, I'm not taking that away, but I would never, under any circumstance, support any curriculum that minimizes how important and how, I mean, a small minority of individuals set the stage for this country in terms of a limited government. And they fought over how to frame that and how to write it down on paper and preserve it. And now you want to just pretend that was a myth? Are you freaking kidding me? It makes me so mad.
And, I'm me, and you're you. I'm 43, you're 27.
That's right.
We're fully formed. When you teach this to little skulls full of mush, and you're an authority figure, and the right answer on the test is 1619, that is an indoctrination that is of epic proportions. There's a reason when Che would take over a country, he would kill the teachers, is he wanted to take over the education of the youth. That's how you generationally indoctrinate a populace. a good education gives you the facts and asks you to come up with your own conclusions. And a decent teacher will take whatever conclusion you come up with as long as you can back it up with facts. And we're losing that part of critical thinking, that this is what I believe and this is why, to if you say, well, my daddy says the country was founded on July 4th, 1776, and they go, well, your daddy's wrong and you're wrong, and you're going to get an F on this test unless you put it the way that I'm presenting it to you. So Arkansas Congressman Tom Cotton introduces a bill withholding federal fundings for schools teaching the 1619 Project, donned the Saving American History Act of 2020.
I don't like Tom Cotton. I don't like the idea of the federal government and all. I mean, that's not. I'm not a fan at all. I mean, I don't think the federal government should be involved in education at all. But I am a little bit appreciative because it made me do a little bit more research in the conversation. But he's made it super partisan, and this isn't something that I feel like should be partisan, even though literally everything is right now. But I don't think it's the right way to correct the course. But that's just my opinion.
Would render any elementary school or secondary school that teaches the 1619 Project ineligible for federal professional development grants. Funds for free and reduced price school lunches program and students with disabilities would not be affected. Look, what he did by dropping this bill, I think is constructive because it's bringing this to the forefront. Mm-hmm. It's bringing the conversation up. And I know we talk about them wasting time and all that stuff. This has a snowball's chance in hell of passing.
Right. Especially in the House.
Yeah, it's just not. It's not going to pass. It's not. It's going to die in committee if it even makes it to a committee. I mean, you get Nancy Pelosi as the Speaker of the House. Speaker wields a gavel and a ton of power. It's not going anywhere, but it does two things. It brings this subject to the forefront and gives him some really, really good press for his re-election campaign. Sure.
And, the bill itself, I mean, first, props, because it's only 5 pages. Like, when do we ever see that? And I know that
4 pages too long.
Well, I agree, but, I mean, still, at least it's not 250 or something. But, and again, it's not the right approach, but it is direct, and it is something that people can digest, and references the 1619 Project a number of times. So, I appreciate that much. But, where's the Department of Education on this? If this is something that the federal government is supposed to have a conversation about, like, where are they on it? I'd like to know, because so the center that has turned this into a curriculum, they've managed to align it with Common Core. Like, they've made worksheets and lesson plans that actually align with the federal standards so that it's incorporated and woven in, and they can't just say, oh, well, they're off on a tangent talking about whatever. And that Nicole Hannah-Jones woman that I referenced that wrote the essay, hers was called The Idea for America. They give the teachers all of the tools they need to teach this in the way that they think it should be taught. And so, it has them read this essay, and it says, talks about how the foundation's actually 1619 instead of 1776, and Black Americans, as much as the men in the nation's capital are true founding fathers. That's what she alleges in her essay. And then they present this table. So on one side, it asks them, after reading the essay, to explain how U.S. laws, policies, and practices have oppressed Black Americans since 1619. And on the right side, it says, how have Black Americans fought against oppression and worked to build a better society for all? Again, I have a real problem with that, is particularly in the time of the Revolutionary War and the period immediately following it, because There were a lot of men who worked to build a better society for all of all colors, and some women too, even though women weren't allowed to vote and all these other things that were not equal under the law. But we still recognize, you can recognize that there were some flaws in how the system was set up, but that the foundations and the contributions that were made it still built a better society for all. You're telling me that you'd rather be under king rule from across the ocean as opposed to the free colonies and ultimately the United States? Really?
And the thing is, yes, much of the foundation was built on slavery. That's a fact. Yes, much of the economic ability, especially in the South, with the largely agricultural society, was in a large part aided by slavery. And yes, that is a dark part of our history. And yes, we need to explore that with school age children and have them understand the reasoning behind it. Have them understand that the religious explanations that slaveholders had are used in order to enslave people. Understand what gave them this idea that they were superior. Understand why Jim Crow laws were enacted, and understand how long those Jim Crow laws existed. The one still existing today is the idea of needing a concealed weapons permit. And understand the sacrifices of people like we mentioned before, like John Lewis and Martin Luther King, that fought to end those Jim Crow laws 100 years after emancipation. But also understand that this has been a steady march towards fulfilling that contract that we signed in 1776, that all men are created equal.
And it's been a work in progress. I mean, and some have taken longer than others. Gosh, women didn't get the vote until long after. I mean, I just... And the conversation, so this has turned into another, if you don't like this curriculum, then you're just against slavery and you're perpetuating oppression and this, that, and the other. But if you dive into the actual documents that they present for educators, it's so clear that they're trying to revise and not just add to it or enhance, like add context, if you will. They are eliminating and replacing, and that's what I have a problem with. And if you look at the documents, which we'll link to, they have this part where you extend student engagement through alternate activities. And here, two of them are the ones I have the biggest problem with. One, it tells them to come together as a class and create a new timeline of U.S. history. Your timeline should start with the year 1619, and you should work with your classmates to order the rest of the events you compiled. Display your timeline along the wall and read your classmates' editions. And then it goes on later on to tell them to display it publicly somewhere in the school so everybody can see it. We cannot undo history. It happened. That is how it's a fact. You can add information to it as if more information has become available, but you can't undo reality. The second part is this whole idea, and I'll tell you why I think that they're doing this, but there's this idea of imagined ancestry that they propose. And it says that an ancestor can be a person from whom you biologically descend, but they can also be a person from whom mental, artistic, and spiritual descent is claimed. So they tell you to create a family tree poster, but instead of populating it with your blood relatives, you put it full of people who are your inspirations. Pardon the language, but that's absolute because your ancestry is where you come from, literally. Where are your roots? And I think that this is part of this idea that we should be ashamed of where we come from, as if we can somehow control that. We can do things differently, and that's the most fulfilling and effective way of making sure we don't repeat the past, is to keep our eyes forward and do better. But this idea that I should be ashamed because somebody, 100 years before my parents even existed did something inappropriate is ridiculous. I'm not sorry for what they did. I had no control over it, and I can't fix it.
Well, and that is punishing the child for the sins of the father. Ancestry is you're redefining the word ancestry.
Right.
Now, if you want to say who are your influences, absolutely, that's a wonderful conversation to have. Who in history do you idolize and why? That's a wonderful conversation to have. But I have a feeling if someone said, "Well, George Washington," and him not being able to tell a lie, and teacher goes, "Wrong. He was an awful human being who owned slaves." The who's your inspiration is a great topic. It's just, it should not be muddled with who are your ancestors.
And you can't just change where you came from. Like, just because that's the whole idea. I mean, this whole thing where we identify as different things too. Like, you can't identify with different ancestors just because they've influenced you. Beyonce is not she's an influencer, but she's not your ancestor just because she has inspired you to do something. And someone in a movie is not your ancestor because they've made you connect on an artistic level. Like, that's not reality, and that's wrong to teach children that.
Absolutely. That your parents aren't your ancestors. Your grandparents aren't your ancestors. Your ancestors are actually Frederick Douglass. Well, no. He's a great influence. And his writings and his contributions to history are humongously important. But he's not my ancestor, that I know of anyway. So to muddle the two, I really think is a effort to de-emphasize family. To de-emphasize the idea that your parents are your parents, that we are your parents now. It takes a village. That we are all your ancestors now. Your parents are not that important. They're just the people who birthed you. They're not what's important here. What's important here is that you identify with this other group of people that you're not necessarily from. It's incredibly unnuanced.
It's concerning, and like I said, there are very few parts of the curriculum where I'm of a curriculum where I would be compelled to speak out about it, because sometimes I'm just like, well, you send your kid to public school, what do you expect? But this started in the media and transitioned into a curriculum that is being picked up. And I mean, I'm aware of some, it's not just like, oh, you're overselling this. This is actually being taught. I know people who are teaching it. They profess it on Facebook, and I know people or kids who have been taught this already. So, but again, Tom Cotton's taking the wrong approach all the way around, because when he filed the bill, he said it's racially divisive. It's a revisionist account of history that denies the noble principles of freedom and equality on which our nation was founded. Not a single cent of federal government should go to indoctrinate young Americans with this left-wing garbage. Well, I agree about the noble principles and freedom and equality and all these things, but don't just paint it as left-wing garbage. It's incorrect. It's incorrect to say that we did not fight these wars because of taxation and representation and government and freedom and all of these things. So it doesn't need to be right and left. It's just wrong. And Tom Cotton doesn't really have this, like, he's inconsistent as hell anyway, because in 2017, he was the one who was up there at the podium pushing to overturn Obama's federal measures for schools, because he said it was federal overreach. he said state and local communities can decide how to best educate their children. So he's a terrible spokesperson for this in every sense of the word, even though the, quote, noble principles of freedom and equality, which he rarely votes for, are true, but his narrative is wrong.
Well, like I said, I appreciate the bill coming up just because, and he knows exactly what the hell he's doing. He knows it doesn't have a snowball chance in hell. I mean, I'm certainly not informing him of anything he doesn't know. And I'd like to see the federal Department of Education go away anyway.
Absolutely.
Oh, hell, I'd like to see public schools go away. And let people keep their tax money and educate their children as they see fit, and let the private sector take care of it. And that certainly would allow parents to have a little more control in what the curriculum is. Am I going to send my kids to a school that teaches the 1619 Project and teaches a completely revisionist version of history? Absolutely not. Not that I have any kids, and it's not going to be an issue at our age. But that's off on a tangent of crazy libertarianism or Dave's republitarianism that will never get traction in my lifetime anyway.
Well,
But we do have historians who are opposed to the 1619 Project.
Yes, and again, I think that it's not that I disagree. I just disagree with the way that they're framing it, but they're kind of taking a partisan approach too.
Yeah, with historian James Oakes, what you really have with this literature is a marriage of neoliberalism and liberal guilt. When you marry those two things, neoliberal politics and liberal guilt, this is what you get. You get the New York Times, or you get literature on slavery and capitalism. So, I don't disagree. It is liberals who are pushing it, and liberals went into academia a long time ago, and they've been festering in that cesspool of academia for a long time, and they've been infecting the minds of young people for a long time. And fortunately for our country, most of the young people come out of college, get real jobs, have a family, and their views start to evolve. And they realize, they get their first paycheck, and they look down at it and go, "Whoa, what the hell is this?" Things start to change. So we've been fortunate to this point in that. But when you start off with grade school children and teaching this stuff, it's going to be hard. I mean, you can't. It's going to be hard to educate them on that. I use the Vietnam War as an example. How many times have you heard that we lost the Vietnam War? How many? But now, when you ask people, they can't cite a single battle that the American fighting man lost. You ask them about the Paris Peace Accords, and they say, "What?" That kids through their entire school lives have been taught that we just got our butts handed to us and left with our tails between our legs, and that's not what happened. So this will be the same thing. This will be ingrained in them from kindergarten, and 20 years later, when they come walking out with a graduate degree, this is what they're going to believe. And I have to believe it's a concerted effort. As I say, they're a patient enemy. We're going to take it one classroom at a time.
That's right.
We're going to change it one class at a time. And with the destruction of the American family and two working parents, especially when you start talking about economically strapped, because I think so many of our problems are socioeconomic, not racial. Parents that don't have the time to sit with their kids and read this and go, "What the hell is this?" No. Answer the teacher the way she wants to be answered. But this is what really happened. And we're losing that engagement. And so much of our kids' rearing is being handed over to government at all levels.
Well, and the Hannah Jones young lady who goes by Ida Bay Wells on Twitter. I don't quite understand it, but her handle is Nicole Hannah Jones. But she spoke out about Cotton's bill last week, and she said that it speaks to the power of journalism more than anything she's ever done in her career. And then she promoted that, it was available for free for everyone to read, and she mocked how conservatives say they're for small government, and this is the opposite of that. But she called it, basically in the comments, like a badge of honor. And then Oprah is going to make it a TV series and TV film through Lionsgate. And like you said, it's kind of one step at a time, just make it a little bit more prominent. Like we said, we hadn't heard about it. And it's been around for about a year now. I think it was the May 2019 issue. But we didn't know about it. It was already being taught. Of course, we don't have kids, but it's frightening to me just from the standpoint that we'll just eliminate something entirely and charge forward. And if you want to keep that, you're wrong. And
yeah, and it comes out with our favorite insult, which is if you oppose this, you're a racist.
Yeah, and that's the end of the conversation.
Yeah, again, there's no good comeback from that. So, Jessica, do you have any closing thoughts?
Sure. I'll go back to our little dear friend Kelly Loeffler just for a second, because she's running an ad, and if you have TV, I'm sure you've seen it. The one where she attacks Doug Collins for early on in his career being a criminal defense attorney. And she actually, in the commercial, references a man named Danny Clore, and she calls him a proud member of the Criminals for Collins Coalition. And she said, Collins for Georgia helped violent criminals avoid jail time. Many of them broke the law again, in this commercial. And she put it on her website because she has first of all, she has a website that's anti-Doug Collins, and then she has a website on her website where she goes after him. And she slams Doug Collins for giving somebody or a number of people, I guess, a vigorous defense. And we don't know anything about the cases. We don't know if he was, if it was a bad case, or if there was a lack of evidence, or why he didn't serve a lot of time. But he wasn't even the person she referenced wasn't even a violent criminal. He was involved with, it was mostly drugs. He had obstruction and a couple other things later on down the road. But the thing she references is drugs, meth dealing, and marijuana possession. And it was dismissed and just discharged thanks to Doug Collins. And she slams him. And I wasn't going to vote for her already, but if I'd been on the fence, or I wasn't sure, or, because that's the race where there's 21 candidates. My God, if you are the kind of person who thinks that people, whether they're convicted or later reoffend or whatever, if they don't have a right to a criminal defense attorney, whether one's appointed or they hire one, and they don't have the right to a vigorous defense in a court of law where the government is coming after people and has the burden to prove it. If it was dismissed and just discharged, then the government didn't prove their case. Blame them. Don't blame the criminal defense attorney. Blame the state.
Right. And, every person is due a vigorous defense. Every person is due a competent defense. It's constitutionally protected. Our founding fathers, many of them, at least one, John Adams was very unpopular for defending British soldiers because he believed in the rule of law, and everyone is due a competent defense. Fact is, look, having a case thrown out because of an improper search, sure, the person may have been guilty, but that's not about freeing that person. That's about protecting the rest of us. Because we say, government, you can't do that. You can't walk into my house without a warrant. You can't just go start opening compartments in my car if I say no without a warrant. When people say, well, he got him off on a technicality. Well, what a scumbag lawyer. No, he's not. It's not about getting that person off on a technicality. It's about protecting my rights and your rights and making sure that government knows, oh, well, we can't do that. We need to take the proper steps. So look, there's plenty to hit Doug Collins on.
Oh, his voting record is garbage.
Right. And that is all fair game. It's absolutely fair game. And you know what? If Speaker Ralston was running, it is completely fair game to say that he uses his position to keep his clients out of court, not give them a vigorous defense, make their cases go on so long that the alleged victims eventually just give up. That's a different conversation to have. But to say that he went to court and protected his client's rights, that's the best thing you could say about him.
Right. And even tough on crime people, I mean, sure, it sounds bad in a 30-second clip, but even tough on crime people can distinguish, like, okay, well, I mean, it was dismissed, so, okay. I mean, that's not compelling.
It's not dismissed because Collins did some witchcraft or paid off the judge. It was dismissed because the government did not have a case, or the government acted improperly. That their evidence was thrown out because of their improper procedures. And you know what? That person that walked free protects millions of other people from having the government run over them. And it also teaches the government to act properly when interacting with a suspect.
Amen.
Well, my closing thought, because I've decided to kick in on yours, is I want to thank everybody for listening. Please like us and share us on social media. Please visit our sponsor. So for Jessica Szilagyi, for Eric Cumby, our editor, I'm Dave Roberts. Have a great week.